Hey, this is your lecture for November 20th, and we're going to be covering pages 192 to 197. And today we're going to be talking about Canada. Okay, so Canada we are all very familiar with because it is our northern neighbor, and we also have just a familiarity with it because of the fact that we have the cross-cultural phenomenon of hockey and other things that come from Canada. But the capital of Canada is Ottawa. I mentioned that because a lot of people in America don't know what Canada's capital is, and I want you to make sure that you know. Okay, so winter lingers in northern Canada for 8 months or more a year, blanketing the islands and the coast with snow and covering parts of the Arctic Ocean with a layer of ice 10 feet thick. When summer comes, it brings with it flowers and mosses and grasses of the tundra. And then further south, you can see forests of pine, firs, and redwood thrive. It's a very beautiful country. This image right here is called the Jack Pine by Tom Thompson, and it's a great, iconic image. It certainly captures the natural beauty of Canada, and it's the most widely recognized piece of Canadian art. I just wanted you guys to see it because it is so beautiful. So in Canada, farmers sow fields of wheat and rye. We have orchards that bear fruit. We have fishermen who bring in nets of salmon and herring. So Canada is very abundant in natural resources. It also has a rich, diverse cultural heritage, and this is because of the fact that originally Canada had French settlements there, and it also had English come in and settle some of the area, but predominantly the French culture has had a strong influence on Canada. And it's overall a thriving and prosperous nation. Here's a picture of wild salmon. So it's located on the northern half of the continent, and it's the world's second largest country after Russia. And it's at 3.8 million square miles, which is pretty huge. It's 3,426 miles from Atlantic to Pacific, and it borders only one country, which of course is us, the U.S. 36,356 miles of seacoast on the mainland, and it has 115,133 miles of islands, and Canada has the longest coastline of any country in the world, which probably isn't surprising looking at the miles of seacoast on the mainland. Northern Canada is sparsely inhabited. It's something of a wilderness, and southern Canada resembles the U.S. in climate and terrain. So if you went there, you would, of course, be familiar with cityscapes and a lot of the, the culture of fast food and restaurants and things like that. But it does have, as I said, a strong French heritage, and so in some places they speak French. So if you're planning on going there, it might be a good idea to learn a little bit of French. From east to west, Canada can be divided into several regions. It has a varied landscape. It has several climates. The first is the humid continental climate, and this is south of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And then there's also a subpolar climate, and that's north of the Gulf. Newfoundland is the largest island off Canada's Atlantic seacoast, and it is divided between subpolar and continental climates. Here is a picture of Newfoundland. It's a huge island, and it's right there if you're trying to get an idea of context. So the United States, Canada, and then Newfoundland. Okay, so I want you to take a moment to read page 193 of your book, The North American Realm. And once you finish that, then you can finish the rest of this lecture. Okay, so let's talk about the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence lowlands. So much of the Canadian population lives in the interior lowlands near the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence River, where the climate is humid and continental. The Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence form the St. Lawrence Seaway, which is the world's longest inland seaway. April through December, ships can travel navigable waterways to ports in Canada and the U.S. What makes this waterway so unique is that it's designed with locks, and locks are huge chambers in a canal or river used to control the level of water, and they're used to raise and lower ships where the elevations change abruptly. It's an amazing technological marvel, and I'm sure there's videos of it on YouTube if you look it up. So here's a picture of the St. Lawrence Seaway system. You can see here a little bit of the lock system. So what would happen is that when there's changes in elevation, they either need to lower or raise ships. And so if they needed to lower the ship for it to reach this bit of water, for example, then the ship would wait in here and the water would be drained. And then when it was drained to an appropriate amount, the ship would be allowed out. It's very, very fascinating. So Canada is a thriving country. It has important shipping centers for grain, minerals, timber, and other goods in the western and central Canada, and this is centered around Thunder Bay. The Bruce Peninsula, Canada's southernmost land area, lies southeast of Lake Huron. East of the Bruce Peninsula lies Niagara Falls, which of course is a popular tourist location. Niagara consists of two waterfalls, the Horseshoe, which is the Canadian Falls, and the American Falls. Here's a picture of Niagara. As you can see, it's gorgeous. Oops. Okay, so let's talk about the Canadian Shield. So this is the third region in Canada, and it occupies about half of the country. The saucer-shaped basin surrounding Hudson Bay has the marshy terrain characteristics of a tundra climate in the north and the dense forest, or taiga, of a subpolar climate farther south. Along the northwest edge of the Shield, Canada's longest river, the Mackenzie, makes its way north to the Beaver Hat. River fed by the Great Slave and the Great Bear Lakes and various mountain tributaries. So the rivers in the area are fed by these lakes and mountain tributaries. Beyond Canada's northern coast, the Arctic archipelago sprawls out across the Arctic Ocean, and North America's largest islands rest here, including Greenland, Canadian islands of Baffin, Ellesmere, and Victoria. Okay, so let's talk about the Great Plains. This is going to be a strong contrast to the north, which of course is a tundra in Canada. But the Great Plains are fields of wheat spread across the southern central region. It's one of the most productive regions in the world. And this is an area where the climate is humid continental, and it's very pronounced. So that means that there are hot summers, warm to hot summers, and cold, snowy winters. Okay, so let's take a moment to talk about the Canadian Cordillera. So North American Cordillera is the most prominent feature in this area. The coast mountains contain Canada's highest elevations, including Mount Logan, which has 19,551 feet above sea level. The Canadian Rockies is the country's largest range. Along the Pacific coast, we have a humid marine west coast climate that provides rainfall and mild temperatures. Canada's mildest temps are found on Vancouver Island, which is the largest island of the Pacific coast of North America. So the history and culture of Canada is fascinating. Obviously, the earliest people who came to North America were Native Americans who lived throughout the territories and most of the provinces today. And of course, it's speculated that these early natives traveled there across the land bridge. The first European to set foot on Canadian soil was that good old Viking Leif Ericson. He established Finland, as did Thorvald a few years later. But the Vikings actually got homesick in the area according to archaeological evidence, and they decided to abandon the settlement and return to Europe. And here, of course, is Leif Ericson. I want to point out that his hat is actually incorrect because Vikings did not actually wear hats like that. So, nearly 500 years later, John Cabot, an Italian mapmaker, explored the coast of Newfoundland and Labrador, claiming the land for England in 1497. He was searching for the fabled Northwest Passage, which of course was an all-water route that was supposed to connect the Atlantic and the Pacific, and it was supposed to run through the continent of North America, but no one was able to find it because it did not exist. In 1534, Jacques Cartier of France sailed beyond Newfoundland and discovered the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Cartier gave France a claim to the valuable fur trade between the French and the American Indians. So in 1603, Samuel de Champlain arrived in Canada and returned to France with a cargo of valuable furs. The French king became interested in starting a settlement to develop a fur trade because of the fact that fur was a very lucrative business. In 1608, Champlain helped establish Quebec, which was the first important French settlement in North America. And the fur traders would live among the natives, and they would take Indian wives. And these fur traders had trading posts that they established, and these trading posts sprang up along the St. Lawrence and in the Great Lakes region. And New France became an important possession of the French monarch because it helped bring in lots of money. So here's a picture of some fur traders trading with Native Americans. So they would establish a cordial relationship with Native Americans, and they would trade the natives for the fur for other things. It could be, kettles, other European items that the natives were interested in. While the French were establishing a fur trade, the British were busy establishing colonies farther south. The British also hired Henry Hudson to explore farther north. In 1610, while looking for the Northwest Passage, Hudson discovered the bay which bears his name today. And in the 1670s, the Hudson's Bay Company, Canada's oldest business, was established. Canada owes much of its development to this organization. The development of the company was spurred by beaver skins because beaver hats were all the rage in Europe. And here's a picture of a beaver hat. So it's probably not quite what you imagined, but it's made from beaver skin. It looks very fashionable. Although the company no longer deals with furs, that is the Hudson Bay Company, it has developed other ventures, including real estate, oil, and gas. But the Hudson Bay Company was very important in establishing for England an interest in northern Canada, and it began a rivalry between France and England in North America that would culminate in a series of wars between the French and the English. The most famous of these is, of course, the French and Indian War, or as it was called on the European continent, the 7 Years' War. This conflict ended with a British victory at Quebec, and England was able to control all of New France because of her victory. And although the French lost their territory, they still were able to maintain rights to their own language, religion, and civil law. So Canada remained a colony of the British Empire until 1867, when the Dominion of Canada was formed. And in 1931, Canada became a self-governing member of the British Commonwealth. So it has a very similar story in some ways to Australia, and in 1982, it achieved complete independence. So in Canada today, the British monarch is recognized as head of state. She's just symbolic. The nation is governed by an elected prime minister who presides over the Canadian Parliament. Canada's population is relatively small for the country's enormous size, and the majority of Canadians live in southern Canada. 28% of Canadians are of British origin, and a large minority are descended from the original French settlers. Most French-speaking Canadians are found in the provinces of Quebec, where they call themselves Quebecois. The Canadians today speak English and French. They have some increasingly diverse population with the native tribes, and they have nearly half of the population that's